C-channel frames flex a lot. I'm adding a 1,200 pound Cummins turbo diesel to this frame that it was never built for, so I'm going to try to stiffen it up. But the problem I want to solve is that if you have any flex in the frame's acting like a spring, but it's a spring that doesn't have a shock absorber to go with it, which means that there's next to no damping on this spring. Makes it very hard to control. I would much rather have all of my flex and movement be in the suspension where I can control and tune for it, rather than in the frame where I can't control and tune for it. That's the objective of this video, is I want to make this frame stiffer. Specifically, I want it to be more rigid in torsion. That is the twisting of the frame. So, how are we going to make this stiffer in torsion? We're going to box the frame. What does it mean to box the frame? Well, it means taking something that's in the shape of a C and making it into the shape of a box. Have it, instead of a C cross section, give it a rectangular cross section. Meaning, take a bunch of plates and weld them onto the frame here. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. We're going to box the frame to try to make it a little stiffer in torsion. Now the question of course is, how far do you go with something like this? And I already made a video where I used some finite element analysis. Now nothing fancy, mind you, just some quick and dirty stuff, in order to tell me how much I could stiffen this frame by boxing it. And I learned that I don't even have to fully box it. I can box it and leave sections for spots where I need to have access to it. And I can actually make this Explorer frame as stiff as the Ram 2500's frame that the Cummins came out of. Most of the time, if I need any steel in order to do anything on this project, I usually use some dirty crap I found in a field or something that I cut off one of the vehicles or some other sort of recycled metal. This time I'm actually buying new metal. I might be cheap, but I try not to cheap out where it actually is going to make a difference. Now you might recall from quite a few videos ago, this trailer. That's the only trailer I have with me here at the moment, and also the only vehicle I have here that can tow it is my girlfriend's Jeep. So I'm going to throw a hitch in my girlfriend's Jeep and head off to the metal supplier, pick up some sheeting in order to box this frame. All right, steel yard haul. I was able to get this 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of 10 gauge, as well as this 4 feet a 1/4 inch plate, 6 inch wide. It was all about 220 bucks. I should only have to use about half of this for boxing the frame, so that'll leave me a lot left over for other random fabrication I needed to do. And then I've also got this 1/4 inch for anywhere that I need to make a much beefier bracket. First things first though, this is really heavy and hard to move around. Even with 2 people, it's not easy to move this around. So I'm going to come up with a quick way to rig this to the cherry picker and we'll go from there. That took some screwing around to get to this to the point where I could actually work on it, but now it's horizontal and I can work on it. If I have to pick it up again, I think I'll screw 2 more holes in the other side and run another chain so that I can pick it up flat rather than picking it up vertical. Let's talk about the next problem I'm gonna have to solve when I'm boxing the frame. So, I live in Idaho. If I were to just come in and plate this section, eventually over time, it would get full of salt and snow and crud, and it would just rust from the inside out and destroy my frame. And this is a lot of work to go through to have my frame rust out and be gone in 5 or 10 years. So I'm gonna have to find out a way to make sure it's not gonna rust from the inside out. Corrosion is an often overlooked aspect of design, but it's very important. I could just spray paint the inside of this and then weld it on or something, but if I were to do that, then all of the spots that I've welded, that's gonna ruin the paint. It's gonna rust in those spots. Now, I think Eastwood makes a frame coating that you can, it's basically like a spray paint bottle, but it's got a really long tube on it and you can pass the tube through the box sections in order to paint them. I could try something like that, but it's really expensive, so there's something else I want to do a quick experiment with and see if it's going to work or not. Here's my solution, or at least what I'm going to try. I've seen a lot of YouTubers lately working with something called Steel It. It's like a spray paint that has stainless steel 316L particles inside of it, and it's supposed to be a spray paint that you can weld through. Well, it's kind of expensive, so you guys know me, I'm a little bit cheap, and I'm not gonna cheap out in places where I think it'll negatively impact the build, but I do try to not go too crazy with setting piles of money on fire building project cars. So I was looking for an alternative to $30 a can for Steel It, and I found a few. One of them is this Seymour 316 stainless. This stuff is like $9 a can, which is about the same price as a normal spray paint. So there's that. Of course, I'm not sponsored by any of these companies. I can't remember what the other brands call it, but Rust-Oleum has a version of this. I think they just call it stainless steel. There's a couple different brands that have a version of this. This is what I found at AutoZone. It's the only one I could find in town, so it's the one I picked. My thought was, if you can weld through this on one side, it probably has reasonably good temperature properties. What I want to try to do is I want to see if I were to paint the inside of the frame with this and then weld the outside of the frame, is this paint going to stay or is it going to burn off? Now, the way I'm going to test this is what I want to do is I want to paint a small section on the bottom of this plate, and then I'm going to take the welder and run a test bead and look at the bottom and see if it destroys it or not. That's the idea. If I can paint the bottom of this and then run a test bead with the settings that I want to use and it works, the paint's still on the other side of it, then I'm just going to paint the inside of the frame with this, and then when I weld everything on, presumably there'll still be paint on the inside. The other good thing about it is that hopefully it'll mean if I ever weld anything to the outside of the frame, I'm not destroying the coating on the inside of the frame. If this doesn't work, I'll have to figure out another way to do it, but this is what I'm going to test first, so let's try it. So this first weld, you could see it didn't do too well. The issue was that I didn't let it dry long enough, and so it just lit on fire. Still gassing off a bunch of paint thinner or whatever's in it, so that paint thinner is gassing off, just lit on fire. Complete failure on that one, but that's my fault for not letting it dry enough. I'm gonna try another test pass here. Now that I waited an hour and a half or so, had some lunch, gonna try another test pass here and see how that does. And the other thing I'm going to do, I went ahead and painted up some plates. I'm gonna do a couple different connections on these and see how they do. So I wanna do one fillet weld, look like that. And I'd like to do one corner joint that looks like that. Now the corner joint is gonna be the most likely to have an issue in my opinion, but it might be the best type of joint for doing this. We'll figure out what works and what doesn't. This is a test weld I did to do my settings on the other side. We'll ignore that. This paint looks really good. I actually really like the look of this paint. Now, I don't want to do it on my whole frame because it's a little bit too glam for me. A little bit too bright and shouty for a frame in my opinion, but if I ever end up doing any tube work or anything, I think I might consider using this paint because it looks, I love the look of that. It does kind of look like a really dull stainless, maybe like a 400 series, like a really dull matte finish stainless or something. It's pretty neat. Sprays real thick. Anyways, so let's try a few more test welds and see how this stuff holds up. It looks to me like in the very center there that it has definitely cooked off all the paint and it's negatively impacted a lot of the paint there. So I rewatched the video and it looked like there was still a little bit of a flame front as I was welding, just a little bit of burning right in front of the weld. What I'm hoping is that maybe it's just because the paint still isn't fully set. So what I'm gonna try doing is leaving that overnight and run another test bead in the morning, and then I'll try running some different joints on those plates that I made up and we'll see if that works. And in the meantime, I'm gonna start wire wheeling off the frame because no matter what I end up doing, I need a clean surface to weld onto and everything else. So let's start prepping the frame. And hopefully tomorrow when I run some more test passes, that paint can perform a little bit better, but we'll see. All right, today is tomorrow. The paint should be dry on the underside of the sheet as well as on these little coupons I cut off. So let's try welding it again. Hopefully it works this time. I also sprayed some of this high heat spray paint on the other side of the sheet over here. So if this one doesn't work, I'll try that one, but I have a lot less confidence in that. And I'll also try doing a couple different joints with this and see if that works. Let's see what happens. Well, these results are interesting. It's not quite as cut and dry as I was hoping it would be. So, if you look at this side on the back of the fillet weld, it is a little chewed away there. So that one, I would probably say failed. However, on this other fillet weld, I would say it passed, especially on the inside. There's a little bit of discoloration, but the paint is definitely still there. Now the difference was, I definitely had a bit of a gap on this weld, and I didn't have a gap on this weld. So that tells me that even a little bit of a gap is enough to take the paint away. The corner weld's almost even more interesting, because if you look at the top, once again it failed, but at the top I was just putting way too much heat into it and wasn't doing a very good job of welding. But near the bottom, where I was doing a little bit of a better job, the paint's still there. So I would say this passes in some circumstances and fails in others. But the big takeaway is that I need to manage the heat. Now, one thing to know is that this little thing has very little heat capacity. It's only a tiny chunk of steel. So when I'm actually welding on the frame, we got the heat capacity of the whole frame to deal with. So the frame shouldn't heat up nearly as much as this did, which means that hopefully I'll get results closer to like the bottom of these welds and the top of these welds. Another thing to know is I was thinking for a minute that maybe the high heat spray would just be the way to go, but I haven't touched this at all, and I don't know if it's going to come across on camera, but parts of that have actually started to chip away without me even touching them. So I don't think the high heat one is a pass. I do think though that this could work as long as I'm careful with my heat. If I put too much heat into it, it's not gonna work. You can see this one where I had a bigger gap, there is still paint there, but it definitely damaged it a little more. Here where I had less of a gap, it didn't damage it as much. The other thing to know is that I only did one pass of paint on this, so I think multiple passes of paint on the frame will help. I think what I'm going to do is just go ahead and do it. I'll try and watch my heat really well when I'm welding, and I'll do multiple passes of paint on the frame, and hopefully the frame being bigger won't heat up as much as this, and I think in the end it'll probably be okay. If it's not, then I can always resort to using some of that Eastwood stuff to paint the inside of the frame or something like that. First, before I do anything, I need to finish cleaning off this side of the frame before I do anything else. That side I was able to get to, this side still needs done. There's everything that filter kept out of my lungs. Maybe replace these a little more often than I do. Alright, that was 2 full days of wire wheeling. It looks good though. I think it was worth it, but that was a ton of work. I know you might be looking at it thinking, why didn't I start with a cleaner frame or something though, but this frame was really clean for Idaho, and you saw that even still there was quite a pile of junk that came off of it, but it looks really good now. It's definitely worth it. Now I need to paint the inside of the frame and then start welding some plates on. Let's go. not too bad. One can let me do the inside of 2 of the frame rails, as well as the underside of this and the underside of this. So that worked all right. Probably only have to get 2 more cans to finish the whole job. My only complaint is that the top of the can is a weird size. Probably because it has to use a weird nozzle to spray the stainless particles, but these little guys don't fit on top of the can, so I'll really give you arthritis trying to squeeze on that trigger all day. But other than that, really happy with that. A couple more cans on there and then we can start welding. Thank you for watching. In this video, we prepared the frame for boxing by wire wheeling it and painting the inside of it, and in the next video, we'll actually start welding the plates on. Subscribe and stick around if that's something that you would like to see, and I hope to see you next time.